Hello wheel winklers and welcome back to the Gamer Muscle YouTube channel. In this video we're going to be talking about the rather splendid, audibly arousing simulator RaceRoom Racing Experience, and specifically why I believe RaceRoom Racing Experience is perhaps the best simulator when it comes to GT3 cars. Now I know those of you watching the channel probably wondering why we're talking about GT3 given our slating of Project Cars 2 public servers and Assetto Corsa public servers and the disease that is GT3 cars with public servers, in the fact that if you load it up and you want to do public server racing, you're going to be driving Spa with a GT3 car. There's pretty much no avoiding it. But you know, sometimes, like a doctor that's experimenting and putting their life on the line, sometimes you have to jump in there and immerse yourself in the disease to find a cure. And well, I think RaceRoom Racing Experience has vaccinated the GT3 woes for a number of reasons that we'll go into within this video. The first one being that the GTR3, essentially GT3 car garage found within RaceRoom Racing Experience is absolutely bananas. We're talking secret layer Bond villain car collection here, you know. Let me just go into the volcano and have a look what we've got available to us. The Audi R8 LMS, Audi R8 LMS Ultra, BMW Alpine, BMW M6, Bentley Continental, Callaway Corvette, which was just added recently. That's the Callaway Corvette C7 GT3R, as they call it in the simulator. The Chevrolet Camaro, Chevrolet Corvette Z06R GT3, Ford GT3, Ford Mustang, McLaren 650S, Mercedes AMG GT3, Mercedes-Benz SLS AMG GT3, Nissan, and you can with a Nissan probably get crashed in T1, P45 Competizione, which is what we're driving at the start of this video, and I do like this car. It feels, to me, driving this car is like being in a Star Wars spaceship on a racetrack, and what more could you want? We've also got the Rough, which is, you know, as everyone knows, the knockoff Porsche, but it's got to be included there. You've always got to have a Rough. When you can't get a Porsche license, you have a Rough. But that's going to change very soon in RaceRoom Racing Experience. Exciting times indeed. BMW Z4 and the McLaren MP4 12C GT3. So let me just close the door of my Bond villain volcano underground car garage and come on. If you're a GT3 fanatic, there is going to be one car there at least that tickles your fancy. And I don't think there's any other simulator with that range of GT3 cars, and certainly not that range of GT3 cars that are to the quality level that you find in RaceRoom Racing Experience. And what I mean by the quality level, and this will kind of merge into another category of what we're talking about here, but the actual handling mechanics of all these vehicles is just really polished across the board. And this is one of the things with RaceRoom, is everything feels of a very similar and very high polish level. Anything that was released in the last year to a year and a half, that is. There are some older vehicles in the simulator that I think are a little bit less solid feeling. They're not god-awful, and they're not as bad as sort of knockoff mod cars you get in some simulators. But, you know, they're certainly not as good as stuff that's been produced in the last year and a half. But these cars not only all handle really nicely, but the sound of them is unbelievable. RaceRoom is still the top simulator for audio excitement. Just the sheer depth of audio layers, wind noise, engine whine, transmission, the actual engine note, stones when you've gone off-road, the actual audio balancing as well, and the overall audio character. It's unparalleled, really, in terms of pure audio immersion. When you've turned the volume up, your eardrums are bleeding, your earlobes are fully erect, and it's enjoyable. And for me, the audio really helps make up for the fact that, let's face it, GT3 cars aren't exactly rocket ships, apart from P45 Competizione. But in terms of speed, they're not the fastest vehicles, they're not Formula 1 cars, and so visually the perception of speed might not necessarily detach your retina, but audibly, in RaceRoom Racing Experience, the audio does give you a fantastic sense of speed. which is generally lacking from GT3 cars in other simulators, bar the occasional specific car that happens to have been done in other simulators. As I say, the crucial thing with RaceRoom is that all the GT3 cars have fantastic audio, so you're not going to go wrong, you're always going to feel immersed, and it's quite nice to jump from car to car. And this leads us to our next point as to why RaceRoom is the ultimate GT3 simulator. And this is a somewhat contentious point because it's both a good point and also a slight irritating point. But that is, you don't need every single car to take part in the GT3 races. Given that there's 250,000 cars, as we've established, hidden in the Bond layer, and you have to. It's quite a lot of cost to use the expensive lift, 4,000 kilowatt lift, to lift them out of the Bond volcano, transport them across from the island to the mainland. Given that, and you do have to buy individual cars or you buy a GT3 pack, it is nice that you don't have to own all of them to take part in a race online with other people. You just need one car and the given track that happens to be running on that server. So it's way more accessible in many ways than other simulators that come out where you need to get all the DLC to take part, even with cars that you don't ever intend to drive. Now, I would say on the other side of that, this is why this is both a negative and a positive, the way that all the content is split up in RaceRoom does make it rather irritating from a consumer standpoint and rather confusing. And the amount of times we've run servers and people are like, oh, what content do I need to get? And I can't just say, just buy this. Well, I could say buy the whole pack, but most people don't want to buy everything in RaceRoom because they just want to buy what's available on the server. So you end up with this conflict and confusion over what to buy. But, well, I might as well clear it up now. What I'd say is buy the tracks. Just buy as many tracks as you can afford. Buy them in the track packs. Get your VRP from the RaceRoom store, not through Steam because it's cheaper. God knows why you have to do that. It's a sort of 30% off price bypass from paying the Steam prices. But buy VRP, buy as many tracks as you can, and just buy the GT3 car you like, or if there's a GT3 pack going, buy that and then you're good to go to race GT3 cars online, and you'll be good to join our GT3 server, which we'll get into later. But yeah, it does get rather convoluted and it is rather confusing, though I have to give credit, as I say, to Sector 3 for having it so that you don't need all the cars or all the tracks on a given server to just join. You just need the one car from what's running and the track that the server happens to be on at that point in time, which is really nice. And so I definitely give Sector 3 some credit for having that option. As I say, it's lacking from other simulators where you have to have all DLC, all cars to be able to join events. Bar, I think iRacing, you can join with just one car, but then you have to remortgage your house to play iRacing, so that's just iRacing. Nonetheless, fantastic selection of vehicles, fantastic audio, and let's talk a little bit more about the specific handling of the cars. And this is what I noticed recently playing the Callaway Corvette C7R, which has just come out recently, that came out last week. And then the other night we were driving the P45 Competizione, as well as some other vehicles that are available in the GT3 class category on our server whilst live streaming. And what stands out is just how solid the physics is in terms of the simulator seems to get the stick of the cars really correct, so that the cars feel as if they've got a real amount of mass to them. When you do things like clip curbing, mow the lawn, or drive them badly and sort of overdrive them so that you're really causing the suspension to have a bit of a hissy fit, you notice that the cars feel extremely planted, but at the same time you also get that perception that there's really nice body roll, which really negates that feeling of driving a plank of wood around a racetrack, which I think some GT3 cars can feel like in other simulators. I also found with the handling with the vehicles that we've recently driven that you can get into a really nice hypnotic groove with them, where the car's very comfortable, very stable, extremely predictable, and you could essentially just turn lap on lap like this without really thinking too much. But you then have this the limit zone. When you start pushing and you start getting aggressive, the cars really then start getting a lot more squirrely, and the chance of you losing control or having to pull it back quickly and really get on your toes increases really dramatically, which I think is very much in line with my expectation of how I think GT3 cars will handle in reality. you know, this is a class of vehicle that's designed primarily for people with too much money that are looking for creative and exciting ways to burn their money. And as a result, there's a compromise in that the real cars have to allow manufacturers to sell something to people that probably don't have the best driving skills and let them take part in races, but also they do have to deliver something that's actually exciting and actually encourages intense racing. From a gameplay perspective, what happens with the GT3 cars in RaceRoom in particular is that you can drive them safely. Say you're leading or you just happen to be doing okay, you can drive it safely, it's fully up to you, but you have that choice of taking more risk and really pushing and really fighting to balance it on the limit, which is a bit of a dice roll at times, but that gives you a chance to catch up with someone that's maybe in front and they're driving a bit safer because they feel like they are safe. And then, of course, if you're both battling for the lead, you're both trying to push on the limit and you end up with that super exciting balls to the felt racing that personally that's what I'm here for when it comes to sim racing. And those of you that are super talented can just drive it, grazing your testes across the tarmac for the entirety of the race. And it is genuinely really exciting, and I have to say, GT3 is normally pretty dull in most simulators. This is why I have a bit of a vendetta against GT3, but in RaceRoom that vendetta has subsided somewhat the more that I play it, which is normally a really good sign. Separate to the cars, and another reason why I think RaceRoom is particularly good for GT3 racing, is the track content in the simulator tends to be fairly suited to the spec of car that GT3 is. They've got a nice mix of circuits in the sim that have plenty of grass at the side, and we know, if a circuit doesn't have grass to accompany the tarmac, it's not really a racetrack, is it? It's essentially a car park. Herman Tilke, the ultimate car park designer. But if we look at the tracks in RaceRoom, you've got the Nürburgring, you've got Mini Brands Hatch because they couldn't afford the full license, or they wanted to spend the money on other circuits. It's a mistake, let's face it, Sector 3, that was a terrible choice. I'll forgive you, but it wasn't a good choice. You need the full Brands Hatch, best track in the world and everything. Mid-Ohio, Silverstone, Imola, Red Bull Ring, Sonoma, Mazda Raceway, Monza, Spa, Portimao, Bathurst, Hockenheimring, Zandvoort, and then a bunch of tracks that I can't pronounce, but they're quite fun tracks to drive, and Circuit Zolder. There's plenty of really good tracks that, as I say, they're that good balance of grass and tarmac, windy, straights, stuff that's a real technical challenge from a driver's side, and a good technical challenge with the speed of car that you've got in a GT3 car. It's as if the track selection in RaceRoom was based around GT3 cars rather than, say, Formula cars. They do have Formula tracks in there, Spa and Silverstone and what have you, but I just think the tracks that you've got, the core tracks in the sim, match really well with GT3. And what's really nice is the way you can set up a server. We've been fiddling with this with the dedicated server in RaceRoom. You can have it so that you set up your quali, your race, and then have it rotate to the next track. Obviously, RaceRoom is built off the R-Factor heritage originally, and these sort of things were established back then, but we seem to have a lot of simulators now where having server rotation and having things all work in a nice, smooth and seamless way has kind of fallen to the wayside a bit. But it's really nice how you can set up a server in RaceRoom, say 10-minute quali, 10-15 minute race, even have multiple races with reverse grid depending on how many places you want to reverse, and then just rotate through all the circuits. It's absolutely fantastic and really helps add a bit of variety and avoid the disease that is Spa in a GT3 car that you find in Assetto Corsa, and even people that actually force it in project cars too. By having that track rotation, it actually keeps it interesting, and having the sheer number of cars, you can then go to different cars to then try out the different tracks, different GT3 cars. There's a really nice variety there, so you don't end up with that dull, repetitive, bog standard, please kill me GT3 race. And that leads me to the last real major aspect of RaceRoom being the ultimate GT3 simulator, which is just the overall end polish of everything. Partly the graphics. Sure, it's not as dynamic as what you find in something like Project Cars 2. They don't have weather, and you only have morning, noon and afternoon in terms of the lighting, so you have night racing, and that'd be really nice for GT3. But the tracks look really nice in terms of the graphical execution, the details, and how well this simulator runs, especially if you're just playing on a single screen. If you're playing in VR, you do have to fiddle with the graphics a bit, and it's not as smooth running as, say, Assetto Corsa. But the actual visual fidelity of everything, you've got all these trackside animated marshals and things, the pit boxes and the pit areas look really populated and have a real lively and real feel to it. The trackside cameras, the end of race cameras, everything that goes into it makes it feel really cohesive and makes it really feel like you're at a race event. When you start with a qualifying, you finish that off and you go to the race, it all flows really nicely and it just looks really solid and cohesive, as I say. And I think that's another thing that's generally lacking from other simulators. They don't quite feel as polished as RaceRoom Racing Experience does. And you know, maybe that's not the be-all and end-all for simulators, but it's really quite pleasant when you load up into a game, you do a race, and it feels like you're actually at a race event just from the overall packaging of everything. And I think if you're the type of person, which I think a lot of people are this type of person, that wants to do GT3 racing, have a really good GT3 race experience, then you won't go wrong with RaceRoom Racing Experience. So that pretty much summarises what you get from RaceRoom Racing Experience and why I think it is the ultimate GT3 simulator. And that was all focused on the multiplayer. Let's bear in mind it has offline racing and it has some really nice AI. At times it can be a bit aggressive, but the GT3 cars in particular and the AI you get with the GT3 cars are spot on for the most part, and it tends to work really well with the tracks. So if you're not an online racer and you're looking for a GT3 simulator for offline racing, again, RaceRoom Racing Experience is pretty much, I would say, the ultimate GT3 racing simulator. Now, as I say, we're going to be setting up our own server. I'm currently trying to sort something out with other people. I'm not going to set my own server up myself. Come on, let's face it. It'll probably burst into flames and destroy half of Sweden. So I'm not doing that. Some other people are doing that. But we're going to have it set up so it's going to be a GT3 server with most of the tracks in the sim, most of the tracks I believe are good tracks for GT3, which is most of the tracks in the sim. The full selection of GT3 cars, you only need one to be able to join it. And then we will live stream those, hopefully at least do once a week of a good multiple hour stream of GT3. And based off our last stream we did with RaceRoom, it will be really fun and really enjoyable, and I can't wait to get back into it. Lastly, worth repeating, if you're going to get RaceRoom Racing Experience content, get VRP from the RaceRoom store. I'll put a link in the video description. I think it's 30% cheaper than Steam if you do that. Also, they're right now, right this second, as this video goes live, there's a 50% off on track content, and I would highly recommend that you get the track. The primary goal when getting content is just get the tracks, because you only need one car to take part, so you can just, once you've got all the tracks, you can join any server effectively. We're going to have a video out on the new Porsches that are going to be coming to RaceRoom very soon indeed. I don't know if they're going to add that to the GT3 category they've got in the game. I mean, the Porsches are GT3 cars, there are GT3 Porsches, so we'll see what happens there. We'll add them to the server if we can. But it's all really good, really exciting, fantastic simulator. Game of Muscle, top recommendation. So, on that note, let me know in the comments what you think, if you agree that this is the ultimate GT3 simulator. Maybe you disagree for an interesting reason. It'll be nice to know what your interesting reason is, and we can have a tire model argument, as it is the foretold law of sim racing. Subscribe, like, do a little dance in your underpants. I'm off for a cup of tea as per usual. Until the next one, guys, thanks for watching, take care, goodbye.